All right, everybody, welcome to today's webcast with Patterson Cake. We're going to go ahead and get started, and super excited to have you here today, Patterson. I'm going to go ahead and head to the backstage and let you get kicked off, and we'll be here if you need any help whatsoever. And just a reminder, at the end of this webcast, we will be doing our breakout AMA. So if you have the Zoom application installed on your device, you can join us for that breakout AMA and come ask any questions you have for us. We'll be there to help you. But until then, Patterson, go ahead and have fun, my friend. See you in a bit.
Awesome. Thank you, Zach. Good morning or afternoon, as the case may be. Super excited to be here today. As I mentioned, been out and about. It's been a while since we've been together, and it's good. It's good to be home. It's good to be with you all, and I'm always, as always, super grateful that you're here today. So, a couple weeks back, my middle son managed to shatter one of his small toes. My middle son is 28, so not a kid, but just mangled his toe and ended up at the ER, and rolled into the ER, and there were 20, 30 people waiting at the ER for help, for emergent need. And while my son is sitting there waiting for some attention, a young lady, eight years old or so, walks in, and she had been running through the yard and passed by a tree, and a tree branch actually hit her in the eye. And so she was not seriously injured, but she's legitimately bleeding out her eyes. And so she sits down, and the nurses come out, and they're checking all the individuals, and they check my son's toe, and they check this young lady, and honestly, it sort of increases your faith in humanity. Everybody in the room that's been waiting for extended periods of times, like, please help the little girl, and they have one doctor on call, and they have a small handful of nurses available, and they are performing triage. They are performing rapid triage. They have limited resource, and they're going through this process, this well-defined process of prioritized allocation of resource. And this is, for me, this is direct parallel with what we're going to talk about today. Prioritized allocation of resource. In my perfect world, I'm sure in the hospital's perfect world, they have enough resource to help every single person that walks in the door right now. But they don't. You don't. I don't. And so they have to go through this process of deciding, of the limited time energy availability we have, where can we best allocate those resources? And sadly, what that results in for my son, for example, is, right now we don't really care about your toe. We care far more about this young lady, and that's reasonable. No argument. That is where we find ourselves. That is context for today's adventure. We are performing rapid endpoint investigations, rapid triage. You have limited resource, and so we have to make choices. We have to make choices, sometimes hard choices. So today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about rapid triage workflow, rapid endpoint investigations. You may have come to a previous session. I've done this once before, and it was called rapid triage workflow back then, and I've expanded it just a little bit, updated it just a little bit. We focused primarily on Windows endpoints last time, but the same overarching perspective. We have limited time, limited resource, and we need to allocate that wisely in order to efficiently respond to active incidents. So today we have an hour. If you've been to any of my webcasts before, you know that I'm going to try and squeeze in at least an hour and a half's worth of content. Having said that, at the end, I'm going to give you some additional resources. This is shortened linked to my GitHub repo, and I will, given some time, we'll talk about that. We'll visit that briefly, and so I can show you what's there. I was mentioning in pre-show banter, whether you caught this or not, this is legitimate workflow that I use. This is not just a compendium of scripts and a workflow I made for a webcast. This is legit part and parcel of production workflow that I'm fortunate to be able to share with you. And so my GitHub repo is a living, breathing, and hopefully constant and continuous improvement. So we'll talk today about context for our adventure. Super, super important. Then we'll talk about the actual overarching investigative workflow. I think that's actually the most important part of this conversation. And then I'll point you to some specific tools, techniques, and then, of course, I'll leave you with some additional resources that you can plumb, visit later. And, of course, the slide deck's available in Discord. Hi, my name is Patterson Cake. I am a digital forensics and incident response consultant for Black Hills, and I honestly, I think of myself more as an incident responder than a digital forensics consultant, because that's mostly what I spend my time doing, engaging with businesses to help them respond and recover from active incidents. And so I'm constantly looking for ways to simplify my workflow. Active incident response is complicated all by itself. And so again, just my overarching mantra is a simple, effective, and repeatable process. And hopefully you'll see that as we go through today's conversation. And I'm trying to keep it simplified. Complexity is the enemy of security. I need it to work. I need it to be effective. And part and parcel of those two things, if I get those right, then it's repeatable. We can do it for this instance and this instance and this enterprise and this business. And again, that's my hope today in sharing this content with you. I like quotes. I like to quote people smarter than I. And this is a really good one. I think this is just fundamental. It is fundamental to my approach to active incident response. We need to sufficiently understand our goals, our environment, what it is we're trying to accomplish. So we're going to spend a little bit of time at the beginning of this presentation just setting the stage for the context of what follows, because it's critical. It's critical to our success. We'll start at about a 30,000 foot view. We'll start high level and then end hands on keyboard. We'll get all the way down, of course, to actual tactical response. This, incidentally, is from the U.S. Marine Corps planning process for battlefield commanders. So I'm going to share with you my one-slide incident response plan. And keeping in mind that I'm a tactician, I'm not typically engaged for strategic involvement. I'm a tactician, and when you engage with me and or my team, you want results and you want them now. You don't want to talk about your 5-year plan. So just keep that in mind. That is my perspective. So let's talk about my, again, super simple incident response plan. And this will define the overarching context for everything that follows. And it's funny, maybe funny is the wrong word. It's funny that when I engage, when folks call and say something bad happened, we had malware detonation, we found ransom notes, business email compromise, insider threat, you name it. My initial presupposition, which proves to be true every single time, is somehow, some way, your technical controls failed. If they didn't fail, we would not be having this conversation. And what's funny is that in many instances, the information technology teams, the information security teams, they bristle at this. They're like, what do you mean our controls failed? Well, somehow, some way, things that you did not want to happen happened, or you wouldn't have called me. So presupposition number one is that whatever you had configured before this incident occurred was inadequate. That doesn't mean that your tools are bad. It doesn't mean that even that they're misconfigured. It just means something went wrong. Something went wrong. It's no criticism of your EDR or your SIM, whatever. The point is, we need to make improvements to stop this and to prevent it from happening into the future. Are we all in agreement? And by that point, we're calming down. Don't call my EDR ugly. Based on that presupposition, the first thing I want to do is I want to kill ingress egress. I want to kick the threat actor off the battlefield. This is a simple ask with complicated ramifications, but priority number one, kill ingress egress. Effectively kill all command and control, and we can take a breather and move on to the next phases of this engagement. The second one is identity. I further want to remove the threat actor's ability to interact with my environment by rotating all credentials. And again, enterprise security teams, they cringe at this. I understand. Rotate all creds. Generally speaking, we then have a prioritized discussion about what that means, and we start with domain admin or global admin or enterprise admin. You get the idea. Ultimately, though, kill ingress egress, rotate all credentials, remove the ability for the threat actor to authenticate. And once again, now we have time to address the first issue, which is your technical controls failed. What are we going to do about it? We're going to, our job in the context of today's discussion is identify all indicators of compromise. If we can do a good job of that, we can use that information to reconfigure, bolster the technical controls that we believe failed, contain, eradicate, do that effectively, then we're set up for success for restoration and return to business as usual. Today, we're going to focus on bullet point number 3, leading into bullet point number 4. My job, again, I recognize this is somewhat oversimplified, but these are critical components, generally speaking, for active IR. And again, the third piece is where we find ourselves today. This is our context for today. Not all things. This is the context. Identification of indicators of compromise in anticipation of bolstering our technical controls so that we can make sure the threat actor is out and can't get back in. This is my super oversimplified view of your entire world, of my entire world when engaging with the enterprise. Something bad happened right here. Something bad happened, an event, an alert, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. This initial indicator is the point of impact. This is where I start my investigative process. Something bad happens, which means you have some indication of that badness. And so we're going to be laser focused right out of the gate on, let's talk about this. My phraseology, point of impact. This is where the badness first came to our attention. Doesn't necessarily mean this is patient 0. Patient 0 could be over here, but right now, this is what we are aware of. And our job from this point of context is to pull indicators of compromise for the purpose of deriving actionable intelligence. And what I mean by that is, from the previous slide, if we can identify indications of unauthorized activity, then we can take those indications and bolster our technical controls, create block lists for our EDRs, block URLs, block IP addresses, etc., to bolster our technical controls. So we'll start right here, and then we'll do some analysis. We'll do our rapid triage right there. And as we derive indicators of compromise, we will slowly extend, broaden our investigative approach, broaden our investigative environment, working our way out until we find nothing else. When we get to the point where we've determined the last indications of compromise, then we've derived attack extents. And if we find all of these things, which is our goal, then we're poised for success. If we do this well, then the rest will necessarily, eradication, recovery, back to business as usual, golden opportunity. Actionable intelligence. I'm going to use that phraseology multiple times today till you're sick of hearing it. My job, simply put, is to roll in and identify all unauthorized access, all unauthorized actions, derive actionable intelligence, feed that to the enterprise for the win. This is my incident response capabilities matrix model. And really, that's a mouthful. All that means is this is the things that the enterprise cares about. This is the attack surface. These are the things that the threat actors want to impact. These can change for you, obviously. For each of these things, the indicators are going to exist in one or more of these 4 general categories: memory, identity, network, and disk. MIND acronym, memory, identity, network, and disk. Those are not discrete. Those are just helpful, categorical, investigative components. This is where we're going to look for our indicators of compromise. How are we going to look into those areas? Well, that depends. That depends on your capabilities. We're going to talk about some specific capabilities today. In a minute, I'll talk about how important it is not to rely on my tooling. not to rely on the things we're talking about today, to build on what you have already in your environment. Do you have EDR? Yes, no. Do you have SIEM? Yes, no. We want to capitalize on what's available to you in your current environment. Of course, I'm going to provide you some insight, potential direct workflow from a technical perspective as we continue today's conversation. So once again, shrinking our focus to our visibility capabilities, and then we'll take the output of those and feed them to our containment capabilities. Again, antivirus, EDR, firewall, etc. That's the prelude. That's the preamble to our rapid endpoint investigations context. Everything that follows is in support of this approach, of this idea. I chose these words, sort of carefully. I've been accused occasionally of being pedantic and being maybe overly concerned about the words in particular. But again, rapid triage, as per my opening story about the emergency room, that's where my mind goes. There's only so many of us. We have only so much time, energy, and effort. We have only so many visibility and capability tools. So how are we going to maximize? And please, oh, please hear me. I'm preaching to myself here. I'm preaching to the choir on a certain level. Silence your inner nerd. Forensics is cool. Forensics is fun. Forensics is often the art of solving a complex riddle. I love it. That's why I do what I do. Having said that, I've come to the conclusion that much of what we learn from a digital forensics perspective is like my son's toe in my ER story. It's really not of preeminent importance. It is not the most important thing right now. I'm not looking for minutia. I'm not looking for, how many standard information attributes are there for date and timestamps in NTFS? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Now, if we can use those artifacts to derive actionable intelligence, let's just take a brief aside. What do I mean by that? We'll talk about that sort of tactically a little bit more in a minute. What I mean by that is, let's say we pull artifacts of execution. We pull indicators from a Windows system of artifacts of execution, and we see that PowerShell was executed during the context of this event, or maybe CMD. What are you going to do with that? Can you block PowerShell in that environment? Can you block CMD in that environment? Chances are, tactically, rapidly, nope, not going to happen. Not going to happen. So derivation from artifacts of execution that PowerShell was run on the endpoint in the date and time of this particular event is not actionable intelligence. Now, it might lead me to actionable intelligence, but that's what I'm talking about. I want things that we can use to bolster containment and eradication. So again, this is hard for us. Part of what makes us good at what we do is we're nerds. We dig the technical minutia. And all I'm saying is, in the midst of tactical rapid response, we need to quell that just a bit and remember that we're trying to rapidly allocate resource to accomplish our goals. I wrestled with this. The reason I sort of came up with this phraseology, this approach, is that we used to do dead box forensics. We used to roll in a few years ago to any active incident, and we'd get a full disk image of the server or the endpoint, and it would take hours and hours and hours, not only to acquire the image, but to transfer the image, to parse the image, to analyze the image. A typical image has, 500,000 to 2-3 million potential artifacts. And how long does that take? Well, literally, we used to say, give me 20, 30, 40 hours, and I'll get you results. In terms of active incident response, that is not very tactical. That is not terribly useful. That's old school. In my perfect world, I love live box forensics. If you can put me in front of a system or server or endpoint with an active threat actor, man, that's my favorite. Talk about active, rapid derivation of actionable intelligence. Let me look at the box live right now. Super, super awesome. Hands on keyboard rarely happens. Rarely happens. So the technical process that follows, I've phrased as tactical forensics. I'm looking for the sweet spot. I'm looking for right in here. We might come back and do this later because there's still value here. But my goal with all of this process is to find this sweet spot between live box forensics and dead box forensics. And I'm here to tell you that I would say, boy, it is really hard to write on here, so work with me. I'd say that we're getting about 98% of the overarching indicators we require from the process that follows versus full dead box forensics. And we'll see that we can do this in minutes instead of hours or days. And so that, again, that's my overarching goal. I told you to silence your inner nerd, and you're all in the chat arguing about disabling PowerShell. That's awesome. I love it. I love you guys. Workflow. Please, oh please, hear me on this. This is of preeminent importance. How you approach this process is most important. The methodology and the analysis methodology, that is what matters. I don't really care what tooling and technology you use. I love this quote from Theodore Roosevelt: do what you can with what you have where you are. If the building is on fire, use the available fire extinguisher. Don't run out and buy the brand I recommended, so to speak. You need to have a methodology. I'm going to present you with an overarching methodology, and I'm going to backfill with some tools because maybe these tools will be useful for you. Maybe they're better than what you have right now. Maybe not. If not, then you move into P2 and P3. Use your own tooling. Make this your own. Customize it, tweak it, tune it, change it entirely. What's most important is that you walk out the other side of this conversation with some ideas about endpoint investigation methodology that work for you and in your environment. I know you've been there. If you've been in IT or Infosec for any length of time, you've worked with someone, heck, maybe it's been you, occasionally it's been me, where I'm just like, I am so focused on a particular tool that I don't know any other way. I'm like, I only use FTK. I only use Magnet Axiom. I only use whatever, fill in the blank. That is not good for you. That is not good for us. That's not good for the enterprise, for your employers. So try not to be laser focused on one way, one tool. Once again, the tactics and procedures, the methodology are what are really important as a result of this conversation. Right out of the gate, from my perspective in active incident response, priority number one is, what are we trying to accomplish? What questions do we need to answer for your environment, for your customer, for the enterprise, et cetera, for your employer? Priority one, if we ask the wrong questions, chances are we're going to get the wrong answers. These 3 bullet points are interdependent and sequential. Ask the right questions, figure out the fastest, most efficient, most effective way to answer those questions. That's bullet point number 2. Number 3, derive and distill that into actionable intelligence to help us bolster technical controls so that we win the day, so that we evict the threat actor. The threat actor can't come back. We move on, again, business as usual. So I'm going to break this down into sort of 3 overarching buckets. And these: collect, parse, reduce, refine. These are the parts that precede our analysis. This is staging our data in such a way that we can answer the questions from the previous slide. Collect, parse, reduce, refine. And we're going to talk about each of these. I'm going to suggest and present some technologies to you one more time. You don't have to use these tools. You don't have to use these tools. What you do need is to develop a workflow around these components from my perspective: collecting the artifacts, parsing, processing those in a way that I can then review and analyze them, and then reducing and refining those so I'm looking at the most critical components of our data collection. And if I can do this well, my goal is to actually complete this process in preparation of analysis in less than 30 minutes per endpoint. And we can do it quite a bit quicker than that in many instances, but that's sort of my target. I have a couple stars, asterisks on this call out because this holds true for Windows and Linux. We'll use slightly different tooling just by nature of the operating system, but the collect, parse, reduce, refine works regardless of the endpoint OS as an overarching workflow. What do I mean by that phraseology? What I mean is collection, parsing, reduction, and refinement. First, we got to decide what artifacts we want. We don't want all of them. Well, we kind of want all of them. No, we don't want all of them. We kind of want, no, we don't. We're going to have this battle with ourselves. Back to my ER analogy. We want to help everybody. We want to do all the things all the time. We can't. We can't. So we're going to be selective. And we're going to choose prioritize based on actionable intelligence for the win. Once we decide on the artifacts, we got to have a way to grab them. Our strategy will be to start with artifact acquisition from point of impact. The third piece is we want to parse them. I gather all these different components from the endpoint. How do I then pre-stage them for my analysis, and how do I do it quickly? I still love a full forensic image. Sweet. I have lots of time. If it's post-incident analysis, nobody's in a hurry, then shoot, give it all to me. If I can get back to you in 2 weeks, golden. That's not where we find ourselves right now. The fourth bullet point, of course, then is once we select, acquire, parse, we need to do some analysis. We need to decide what's evil, what's not, what is an indicator of compromise. And my suggestion categorically, as we talk through this again, is just high-level memory, identity, network, and disk. Those are the places we want to look. Those are not discrete technical buckets. They're just helpful ways for me to remember to look in those different points of contact on an endpoint. That's our focus today. When you're done with that, of course, you can expand your analysis context. You can look to the SIM. You can look to some other solution, monitoring, etc. You're going to back up a little bit, look for additional indicators of compromise, trying to find the entirety of everywhere the threat actor's been and everything the threat actor's done. Nail that, we win. We contain, we eradicate, we move into remediation, recovery, and job well done. Which artifacts do we want? Which artifacts do we want? This is hard. This is give and take. This is dynamic, and this may change for you, for your environment, for your investigative needs. Remember back to a few slides ago, what question are you trying to answer? What questions are you trying to answer? And then we need to choose wisely from a Windows/Linux perspective, where can we potentially derive that information? EVTX for the win. I want event logs. There are a subset of EVTX that I really want more than others, and we'll look at that when it comes to the reduce and refine. Right now, we're just at the selection phase. Which artifacts do we want to grab? Well, I want all the event logs. MFT, again, in the context of full forensic imaging, it'd be sweet to have the whole hard drive, right? That's awesome. It's cumbersome. It's extremely slow, and the number of artifacts in the from a disk perspective are just gargantuan. So instead, we're going to extract MFT from at least the 2 or 3 primary partitions. This gives us visibility into the hard disk, so to speak, without actually having to copy the entirety of the disk contents. Network, memory, identity, network, and disk. I want to see netstat. Netstat is a tremendous point-in-time view of network sockets. Maybe useful, maybe not, but it's svelte. It's light, high ROI, so we're going to grab that. DNS cache, similarly. This is transient. This is not long-lived, but let's grab it while we're there since it's tiny and it's easy to analyze. The next one is, honestly, it's my favorite. If I had to choose one artifact for active incident response, it would probably be running process with command line. If I can do live box forensics, this is the first place I go. Filter, sort, remove normal And often it's really, really easy to identify evil in the context of running process with command line. So we will grab that. Autoruns. Autoruns is a sysinternals tool that grabs a bunch of ACEPs. These are startup persistence, usually, kinds of mechanisms. So this is a great way to grab components of the registry, scheduled tasks, et cetera, already sort of pre-compiled and predefined. So we're gonna prioritize that, specifically, again, looking for persistence, generally speaking. I dogged on artifacts of execution earlier, but I want them. I do want them. They're fairly lightweight. And again, in the context of Windows, artifacts of execution just mean what ran, what executed, what executables were invoked on this endpoint in the context of this engagement. Last and definitely not least is I want all of the web artifacts I can possibly get my hands on. This is the attack vector of choice. Doesn't surprise any of us. The end user, unfortunately, is likely the weakest component from a technological perspective, and probably they interacted with evil through their browser. So I'm going to grab this and parse it a couple, 3, 4 different ways, honestly. And then I'm going to take advantage of this cool Cape triage package, because a lot of time, energy, and effort has gone into defining other things we might want. And I'll show you specifically what that entails as we move forward. That's it. That's my prioritized list. I tweak and tune and wrestle with this just a little bit. This changes for me on a continuum. You'll see some iterations on the GitHub repo, but this is what I want. And this is what we will collect, specifically using Velociraptor offline. Now, you don't have to use this tool, obviously. I like the artifact selection that we talked about just a second ago. You can make that your own. You should please make that your own. And then if you can acquire this through your EDR or some other sort of RMM capability, then sweet. No harm, no foul. But this is one potential way. I like Velociraptor offline collector. Keyword is offline here. I do not use Velociraptor. I don't think particularly like the developers designed. I use it specifically to collect the artifacts. That's it. I don't use the infrastructure, the query language, etc. That's a cool solution, but for my purposes, I just am using this to grab the artifacts. So these are the categorical artifacts from a Velociraptor perspective. You'll recognize these. We just talked about them. These are available artifacts, predefined in Velociraptor, super easy. So easy, in fact, I'm not going to demonstrate this for you. I have it step-by-step documented for you in my GitHub repo. So just work with me conceptually here. We're going to use Velociraptor offline collector. We're going to create a standalone executable. We're going to choose these artifacts. Things I love about this. As mentioned, standalone executable, no infrastructure required. We can just create this exe. We can deploy it. We can execute it on an endpoint or multiple endpoints. It can be done at scale through your RMM, through PDQ, through SCCM, through group policy. Create this executable. Run the executable on an endpoint. It is not an agent. It doesn't keep running. It doesn't persist. It just grabs this data. Beautiful. That's what I want. It creates a local zip archive of all the artifacts we just defined. And then my special favorite is I love the auto upload to secure S3 storage. I'm going to do my analysis in EC2 on a Windows box. And so I can directly interact with the S3 components, automatic upload through Velociraptor offline, the end. And conservatively, I've done this on, thousands of endpoints. I don't really have a number, but I've done this a lot, and it works. It works. This is the GitHub link. Let me see if I can just pull this up really quickly. Obviously, you don't need to read this right now. We're going to talk about some of these scripted components. That's the actual repo contents. And then I literally, rather verbosely, take you through step by step by step, acquiring the Velociraptor executable, pre-staging all the necessary components on your workstation, step by step, choosing each of the individual artifacts as we see on screen. Again, step by step by step by step, all the way through, complete with how to configure your S3 IAM policies, all of the stuff that I legit think you need to put this into practice. From a production perspective, you're going to want to test it, you're going to want to tweak it, you're going to want to make it your own, but I've custom written a couple artifact collections, et cetera, and this is all here waiting for you. Hopefully after we get done, you can explore that. And spoiler alert, at the very end, I'll suggest that you might, if you're interested, come back. I've got a 4-hour workshop where we will go through this together and analyze 3 different exploited endpoints, 2 Windows, 1 Linux, through this process. So if you want more, I'll give you more. I don't want to belabor this one. This is the reduction and refinement process. So remember, we selected the artifacts. We're going to build an offline collector in order to grab those artifacts. We're going to upload those someplace, or we're going to move the zip file to our analysis machines. And then what? Well, then we need to parse it and reduce and refine it. We're going to get a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of useful information, but I don't want to look at all of it right now. I want to look at the important pieces. So these are actually web components. These are 3 different views into web artifacts from the endpoint. Super useful. I'll show you in a second. These are artifacts of execution, what ran on this system. Those are indicators that point me to other pieces and parts of this particular exploitation. This is all event logs. This is my own custom cape parser. And this says, okay, take all of the event logs and show me the ones that I care most about based on date and timestamp and based on a handful of specific event IDs. So I'm going to grab all event logs, but initially I'm just going to look at the most critical. Hayabusa, if you're unfamiliar, you definitely want to check this out, is a Sigma-based set of detection rules that you can use to scan EVTX. Love this tool. It's the only actual security component for this parsing process. Gives me some high-level visibility into finding evil event logs. Lastly, this is MFT. I don't really want to look at the whole MFT. What I want to look at is file listing. Further, I actually only want to look, at least primarily, at executable files in the context of the date and timestamps of this investigation. So I'm going to grab all of the MFT, I'm going to reduce it to file listing, and then I'm going to reduce it to executable content based on file extension. Do you care more about .txt or .ps1? It's exactly what we're doing. I'm saying I can always go back and look at .txt later, but right now I'm interested in PS1 and exe and MSI and .bat and etc. And then I've created, that's not fair. I've taken advantage of a bunch of other effort for the invoke cape PowerShell script, which is not mine, referenced in the GitHub repo. I'm going to use PowerShell to unarchive the zip files, to invoke cape and parse all of these things for me. And then my pen's not working. Oh, yeah, it is ever so slowly, latent pen. And then shocking, I like Excel. I'm going to use this. I'm going to use the Excel executable to actually refine all of this into a singular workbook with multiple worksheets for your analysis. That works too. The scripts are expecting the Excel executable. Let's look really quickly. I'm going to show you what this looks like, and recognizing that this is a very high level. This is the output of the Velociraptor executable. We create the Velociraptor offline. We detonate it on the endpoint. It creates this zip file. It's fairly clearly named by your case name, the fully qualified host name, including domain. And this is about a gig. That's fairly common, a gig to 2 gigs, generally speaking. We're going to grab that, move it to our analysis systems. We're going to unzip it, and this is what you get. Remember, this is just the collection phase. This is not the reduction and refinement. This is just collection. And this is what I have. Some of it's already parsed. And the easiest are those that you see right here. Remember DNS cache. You remember auto runs, running process. I threw in services here because I think that's useful. I could go straight to analyzing these, but I still want to make my life easier. You need to know that they're there. but I'm not going to access them there. You can also drill into uploads, and you'll see here's where the full MFT lives. I don't want to see this. I don't want to open it. I don't want to parse it. It's sitting there waiting for us. And if we need to analyze the whole thing, there it is. Additionally, and you should explore this one because this is dynamic. This is based on Cake triage, and it's actually trying to pull for you antivirus logs, some critical components of the file system, the full EVTX, et cetera, et cetera. I'm probably not going to go here, but if I want to go dig deeper, is there potentially some value in the Defender logs? You betcha. I'm not going to start there. That is not my highest priority. But again, all of this is part of your collection. The next thing I'm going to do is use my parsing script, which I've made available for you, of course, on the GitHub repo. And I'm going to create this output. I'm going to consolidate the important CSV files, autoruns, netstat, pslist. I'm going to concatenate web, artifacts of execution, and EVTX into this one spreadsheet. This is all created for you automatically through the scripted process. And at the end of all that, you get this. This is the reduction and refinement of the things I think you want to see right now. And you'll see a whole list of cool stuff here. Let's go over to browser timeline. This is from Hindsight. I love this. This is browser activity. You might just want to go straight to downloads view because this is a tremendous indicator of, anything evil here? Oh, I don't know, possibly. We can come back to that later. Spoiler alert. Web, artifacts of execution based on individual user. We can pivot all the way over to EVTX triage. This is based on date and timestamp relative to the incident, specific set of events that I want to look at. Hayabusa is a tremendous tool. I love this tool. We can filter, we can sort by date and timestamp. We can say, show me triage. Show me high. Keep the information alerts to yourself. We can zip down to the actual context for our event and probably find evil a few minutes time. That's the goal of this process so far. A little bit of insight into how I actually perform this, just for point of reference. I use EC2. I use a, generally speaking, T2 extra large or larger, depending on how quickly I want this to occur. By the way, extra large is a lie. That sounds like, oh, wow, that's high powered and useful. It's weaker than your laptop. So just keep that in mind. This is not a super high powered device. This is 4 CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM, I think, something like that, which is like, that's all right. You might want to scale that up, but this is generally what I use. This is important. I separate my OS and my tools from my data partition because I want to be able to flush this. I want to rotate the data volume based on my case, and IOPS are directly proportionate to the size of the drive. So this is a performance thing. Do I need 1 terabyte for this? Probably not. In my perfect world, I'll probably scale this to 2 terabytes because GP3, the IOPS, the speed and performance of the drive are based on the size of the drive. So I'm paying for 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes for the speed, not for the storage. These are the remaining components. I'm running this primarily on Windows. I've outlined every single one of these, including links. You're going to need to do a little work to stage this. You only have to do it once. Again, if you follow sort of this methodology where you have an OS and your tools and your capabilities directly on that primary drive, and then you flush or rotate the data or case drive. You only have to do this once. It does take a little time, energy, and effort. Pre-stage those, pre-stage the scripts. All of this is made available to you. Basically, you run these 2 things. It leverages the Excel executable, and you get the output that we saw just a second ago, specifically parsed, reduced, refined for your investigative joy. You don't have to do this my way. But you do have to adjust the scripts if you want to do it differently. This is just my general approach. I'm staging my tools on the C drive because I'm leaving that fairly static. and then the D or the E or whatever for my case volume. The scripts are looking for this sort of a syntax. Now, you can obviously change that, but you just need to be aware if you do so. I have an expand archive script because if I'm doing this, I did this in an environment just a week before last, and I pulled about 75, 80 images, and I don't want to unzip them all manually. So just the expand archive takes care of that for me. And then this the script is designed to run at scale. You point it at your case name, and if there's 1 in there, sweet, 1 gets parsed. If there are 50 in there, 50 get parsed, and away we go. As mentioned, with this kind of capability, I did this recently on 6570 endpoints. It took a little bit less on average than 15 minutes to acquire the data, to upload the data to S3, and it took an average of 14 minutes to process, parse, refine each of those endpoints. So a little less than 30 minutes, and then we were ready to analyze each endpoint, which is not bad. We could have done it faster, honestly, if I'd paid a little more money for a little more IOPS or et cetera. Under the circumstances, that was perfectly adequate. So again, a little less than 30 minutes per server endpoint. Oh, minor caveat. That incident was actually based on an FBI alert. The FBI alert was from 2023. Thank you, FBI. Hey, just wanted to let you know, we think something bad might have happened in your environment 2.5 years ago. Sweet. So we did this analysis for an almost 1 to 2 year look back. So we did a very large data set, and it still only took a little less than 30 minutes per endpoint, which is, again, was pretty happy with that. Yeah, hang with me. We're getting close to the end. I want to talk specifically about a couple investigative components, and then I'll talk briefly about Linux and how we can adapt this to that process. This is my overarching, oversimplified, start from event context, filter out normal as best you are able, focus on the actionable intelligence pieces, and ultimately derive useful indicators for bolstering your security capabilities. My goal would be in less than 30 minutes per endpoint, ultimately. Not perfect, not 100% visibility. We're just trying to tactically drive analytical components. Really quickly, from a workflow perspective, if you subscribe to my selection of artifacts, which you don't have to, but if you do, and you use this process, this is generally how I would approach the analysis, specifically step by step. Once I have my concatenated Excel workbook at the end of my script, this is usually where I'll go. I'll usually peek here first because it's short and it's easy to parse and filter. This timeline is related to web, so I'll probably look at those right out of the gate. The next thing I'll often do is go to Hayabusa and say, any criticals, any highs? Next, EVTX, you get the idea, working my way down this list. Usually in these first 3 steps, I have indications of badness. And then I can use all those indications to search across the entirety of my data set and, again, move through this process sort of linearly. Linux is different. You probably knew that. In some ways, it's easier. And primarily, it's easier because a lot of the artifacts don't require parsing. Most of the artifacts are literally text files. They're files that you can read. Now, you might not want to read them, but they're not like the registry or some proprietary EVTX format. They're legitimately just text files that we can often peruse just as a human being. So these are the artifacts I want. They are directly in parallel with a lot of the Windows artifacts. Cron tab, if you're unfamiliar, these are scheduled tasks, basically. These are running systems and services. I want information about logged in users. This one's fun because we see the threat actors improving our passwords after they exploit our boxes. Sorry, true stories. I want indications of executable files. This is similar to the MFT process that we have for Windows. This is show me all the executable content that was created and or accessed if possible during the context of this event. SSH, spoiler alert, all the badness happens through SSH. And I mean like all the badness. So we definitely want to pay attention to that. Running processes one more time. This is my favorite artifact. Netstat. because network sockets, why not? Bash history is not often super useful, but it's just easy. It's lightweight. Why not grab it? You might see activity directly by the threat actor. How are we going to do it? How are we going to grab these? Oh, did I mention this is all outlined on the GitHub repo? Let's look really quickly, just in case for any reason you had to leave. At the top of the same repo, I have links to instructions about how to use the Linux components, how to create the collector, how to do all the things. Once again, you don't have to use VR offline, but for the sake of simplicity and repetitiveness, I'm going to. And so we're going to build a catscale collector. Catscale is just a script for artifact acquisition. Super simple, super easy. You build this artifact in Velociraptor. I tell you how. I point you to the source. And we're going to get all these things. And we're going to create an MUSL file, which is a very, very portable standalone executable for your offline collector. And then it does the same thing. Run it as root on an endpoint and upload to S3, create zip file. Then we move into the analysis process just like we did in Windows, with the major caveat that we don't have to parse a lot of this. So again, I'm going to skip over this. You can come back to it. It is step by step on the GitHub repo. There's an option. Linux is weird. Nix is everywhere. Like, is Android Linux? Well, yeah. Is Mac Nix very? Well, yeah. So some flexibility is in order. And so, excuse me, I also have the UAC or Unix-like artifact collector linked and described for you from a workflow perspective. Sometimes the VR offline collector won't work properly, especially if you're dealing with a custom Linux kernel. So this is plan B. This is plan B, and it's, again, outlined for you specifically. I don't go here first because I want the simplicity of the VR offline if I can, but this is an alternate mechanism for collecting your data should you need it. And legit, you can make this run on Mac. You can make this run on custom Linux kernels, et cetera, et cetera. Super flexible. So again, plan B from my perspective. Almost done. Hang with me. Linux is, again, it's pretty simple. This is the stuff I want to see. This is my analytical approach. We're going to derive all of these indicators through our collection process. And I want to look at running process. And I want to look at running process in the context of users. Typically, it's not going to be the root user that's exploited initially. So I'm going to look at other users. I'm going to look at running process. I'm going to reduce and refine. I'm going to eliminate normal. And this is often really, really, really illuminating. Spoiler alert, two things happen like in every exploited Linux box lately. SSH is abused, and probably they're going to run some sort of crypto miner. So we want to look for those things in particular. Network sockets, I love Netstat. Netstat works on Windows. Netstat works on Mac. Netstat works on Linux. Looking for network sockets, SSH logins. This is just a straight up log from your Linux endpoint. But we definitely want to look there to see, did somebody log in that shouldn't have? As mentioned, we don't have to parse these. So I don't really have a fancy script to parse these and reduce these. You're just going to enumerate them somewhat manually after all of this is acquired for you, and then do a little bit of manual reduction. This is a really cool part of the catscale, that we can directly map executables to SHA-1 hash for the current rendition. So this is super, super helpful if you're trying to identify new executable content created in the context of this event. This is extremely illuminating. Pay attention to this, please. The threat actors are paying attention to what we're doing. And for the most part, we've removed root, we've removed local admin, you've removed local admin from your users, right? The threat actors are now assuming that you don't have local admin, that the exploited account doesn't have local admin. And so where they are writing executable content are world writable directories. This is where you want to look. And by world writable, I mean that the standard user can write and execute content there. So pay particular attention to those, both in a Windows and Linux perspective. I'll show you more momentarily. Like I said, almost done. This is the overarching workflow revisited. There's a little bit of extra context here, and I hate to be self-serving, but I would love for you to come back for the 4-hour workshop and I'll explain this more. The first couple components, this is our threat intelligence. This is us being smart about what's happening in the wild right now. And this takes some dynamism. We want to pay attention to this. We want to adapt our selection of artifacts, our parsing of artifacts based on these things. We don't want to just get stuck in what works today because tomorrow is going to be a little different. So we're going to want to learn a little bit, and I will share with you everything that I know, honestly, from a current malware threat actor behavior perspective in the workshop next month. The more we know about common behaviors, the more targeted our artifact analysis and acquisition can be. This is how are we going to be attacked? How are we going to be exploited? Well, I just told you, SSH for Linux. Shocking, right? You weren't expecting that. Just as an example, we're going to work on filtering out noise, normal, again, focusing on the highest fidelity indicators, working towards actionable intelligence. This is what I mean. If you are going to focus analysis, if you're going to do rapid endpoint investigations today, you should look in these components, look in these spots. This is a no-brainer. This is your memory indicator. Is it running right now? Yes, no. This does not require local admin. So the threat actors, common malware, everything abuses scheduled tasks. You should look there. These are world writable directories for Windows. These are world writable directories for Linux. You'll recognize this, scheduled tasks. You get the idea. This is important. These are literally the first places I would look on both Windows and Linux. Oh, I'm tired. Are you tired? Additional resources. Come back and see me. Pay forward what you can. So low cost, low barrier to entry. If you can't do that, if you don't want to do that, then again, I've staged all this stuff for you. It's all there. And I try and keep it current, up to date. If you have an issue, if you have a request, you can hit me through my GitHub repo. I don't understand how this collector works. Or can you add this artifact? It's dynamic. I'm paying attention. So let's be friends. Here's my contact info. I'm done. Whew. Like 2 minutes to spare, kind of. Questions? Can we do questions?
Thank you, sir.
2 minutes of questions.
Very good, my friend. Very good. I think people like this, Zach. I have a weird indicator in my brain that says people enjoyed this talk.
I love you all. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking your time to share your knowledge with us, man. Awesome.
I like talking about it.
Well, we would never get that impression. It just seemed like you hated every last second of this. But that said, you did mention some questions.
Oh.
And we do the question thing, but that is for the Zoom viewers. That's right. This is a special thing for the Zoom viewers. And we thank everyone that joins us in Discord, especially for the amazing memeage and GIFs. They just chef's kiss, as it were. But we're going to jump over into the backstage area. Actually, we have a breakout room called Antisyphon AMA Q&A. You can jump in there. It's going to be down there in your Zoom area. Find that room and go ahead and jump in there. And that's where we're going to have Patterson join us for a little bit longer, for about 30 minutes or so, and let him answer some of your questions. And that's a really cool thing for the people that joined us via Zoom to be able to do, to kind of even use their camera and their microphone and have some face-to-face time with him. But if you're not comfortable with that, that's cool. We can also just use the chat there as well. So thank you, everybody that's joined us in Discord. We're going to go ahead and let you go. The rest of us, we're going to find that backstage area that, the breakout room. It's under more, and then you'll look for, what is it, under resources? Where does that go?
Should say breakout room.
I think it should say breakout room, yeah. And then once that pops up, you can then, it's now showing up. Click breakout rooms and you'll see Ask Antisyphon Anything and click your join button, and we will see you there momentarily. Have fun. Good day, kids.